Hey, what's up, guys? It's the Agent Candy Bars, Jeremy, here to do something a little different from my usual stuff. Today I'm going to be aiming a video at my flight simulator friends who are flying on the VATSIM network. This particular video is going to be aimed at the people who are just getting started, who maybe haven't made their first flight in VATSIM yet, or will be making it soon. It's kind of off the cuff. I'm not really scripting anything here, but I wanted to take a moment to share some things with you guys that I learned when I very first started with VATSIM. I still consider myself a new flyer. I've only been doing this for 7-8 months, and I haven't got to fly as often as I would like to, but I'm kind of out of that very beginning phase where I'm just starting to figure out the basics and getting into the more nitty-gritty of things, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to share the things that I learned since it's still fresh on my mind. Now, I'm not going to be talking about how VATSIM works or how to file a flight plan or anything like that. I'm not here to do that. There's a lot of videos on YouTube and everywhere else to help you figure that out. So if you're looking for advice in that respect, I'm probably not the guy to go to yet. But there were some things I wanted to share that I thought were good to share with people who had not yet really gotten the hang of things. And I wanted to start by telling a story about the first time I used VATSIM. Now, looking back, I have no idea what I was thinking because it was a terrible choice for a first flight. Last year, when the hurricane was going through Texas and it had gone inland and it hit Houston, I got on VATSIM and had plans to take my first flight. But when I had my flight plan all set up and I got looking on VATSpy, there was no ATC anywhere near where I wanted to fly. And I was like, well, that's not any fun. I want to go where there's people. Well, it was pretty late at night here in the United States at that point, and the only ATC that was online was this poor guy who was running the tower at Houston. And there were a few brave souls flying in and out of there, I guess, who wanted to really try their hand at bad weather landing. So stupid me, I'm like, hey, I got this. This should be fun. So I quickly scrounged up a new flight plan to go from Houston to, I think I planned it for Little Rock. I'm not really sure where my destination was. I can't remember. So I spawned onto general aviation. I quickly went and got a chart for Houston and went to go start the litany of following my getting clearance for my flight plan and everything else, and it was just a disaster from the word go because I was trying to write all this stuff down off the cuff while he was telling me, and then he gives me my taxiway clearance, and here's where the real problems began because I hadn't spent any time looking at the Houston charts. I knew I was in general aviation, but I wasn't really sure where on the chart where general aviation was, so I wasn't really sure where my taxiways were. And I thought I found one, and I started heading in the right direction, or at least I thought it was the right direction, and quickly Tower contacted me and said, Victor 203, you're going the wrong way. And I was like, okay, so I stopped and I turned around and started taxiing in the other direction, and next thing I know, I missed the turn for the intersecting taxiway I needed, and sure enough, Tower calls again, Victor 203, you missed your turn. And at that point, I stopped, and he said, Victor 203, expect aggressive taxi. And I'm like, oh, great, now he's going to lead me by the hand. So I'm really embarrassed at this point, and I'm sure he's really upset with me. So he finally gets me to my runway of choice, and I go to take off, and as I get into the air, he's, of course, giving me my frequency for Dallas Center, or Dallas Center, or whoever it is that runs the overall district down there. And I'm in my cockpit trying to navigate my switches to get my radio all switched over, and when I get back up into my HUD looking out what's going on outside the airplane, I'm looking right at the ground, and the next thing I knew, I crashed. So it was a really embarrassing situation from top to bottom, but it was also a very educational one because I learned a lot of things in that one instance that I promised myself I would do my very best never to repeat again. And I'll go through those lessons that I learned here with you now. When I had just installed VATSIM and was just deciding I wanted to get involved with the community, I had just downloaded the aircraft that I'm flying right now. This is the Aerosoft F-14X program. Beforehand, I was flying the the Iris freeware F-14, both when I was still flying in Flight Sim 2004 and again after I installed Flight Simulator 10. It is a much more complex aircraft. All the switchology is more accurate to the real thing. The flight characteristics are very accurate to the real thing. The Iris program looked pretty and it was cool to fly, but it wasn't very accurate. And it was a very hands-off, user-friendly aircraft. But I'm not trying to review the airplane. Just to point out that I had a lot more on my plate that I didn't realize. It had been maybe my third flight with this program when I decided to get on VATSIM, and I was like, I can get it off the ground. It shouldn't be any problem for me. And I was very wrong. So know your aircraft. Before you even decide you want to learn VATSIM, pick an aircraft or two that you really want to learn to fly, or that you think you're going to spend a lot of time flying, and really get to know that airplane. Get to know your startup procedures, your shutdown procedures. Learn how to use your radio stacks. Learn how to use your navigation radios, everything like that. Because when you go to learn VATSIM, the last thing you want to do is have to spend time learning your aircraft while you're learning VATSIM all at the same time. That's, you're kind of chasing two dragons at once, and it's a mess, and you wind up just causing more heartache than anything else. So make sure you know the airplane that you're going to be flying for the most part, at least well enough that you can listen to instructions and not freak out trying to figure out where all your buttons and switches are, like I was. It was a real mess. Which leads me to big tip number 2. Know the airport you're flying out of and flying into. This is crucial. Because I had no idea about the airport where I was at. Like, I hadn't taken the time to research where general aviation was. I wasn't really paying attention to where I had spawned in at. I just knew I wasn't at a ramp and I wasn't on a runway, but I didn't know where I was. So take time to figure out where you are and where you're going. Now, I think a good piece of advice here is also, with the aircraft, is find 2 or 3 airports that you know you're going to be flying out of a lot. Probably maybe something close to you and a couple you plan on spending a lot of time flying in and out of. The caveat to this is you should probably stay away from the really big traffic airports until you're used to flying and getting instructions and basically more comfortable with the program. So I would not recommend someplace like LAX or Atlanta or LaGuardia or someplace like that to be the first airport you learn to fly in, because anytime there's ATC going on there, things are pretty hectic, and it's very much like real life in that respect. And they're expected to get aircraft in and out of there, and they fire off instructions at a pretty rapid pace. So maybe pick something a little more middle of the road. Like the big airport I chose to spend a lot of time practicing out of is Denver, because there's still a lot of traffic that comes in and out of there, but it's not quite as fast paced or hectic as some of the really big airports. And it also gives you a chance, because most big airports have predetermined routes in and out of their airspace. For example, when I fly out of Denver, a lot of times if I'm looking just for a short hour and a half hop, I'll fly from Denver to my home city here in Wichita, and I usually take the Plains 8 departure, which I know is going to point me direct to the Goodland VOR, and I'll be heading east on that route. There are various different routes in a lot of the big airports, so it's really important to spend some time looking at those and at least have a nodding acquaintance with them, because if you're flying into a big airport, chances are they're going to use that terminology. They're not going to give you specific vectors, or I guess they could if you ask for it, but they're going to assume, and they're going to ask you to take a route that they know by name. Something you can do to help mitigate some of those issues is when you go to file your flight plan, it is a good idea to put a note. There is a section for notes in your flight plan to mention that you are a brand new pilot, or you're a new pilot. And I also recommend sending a private message over the vPilot or whatever app you're using to the controllers in your area saying that you're a new pilot. If they're good controllers, and most of them are, they will take the time to maybe slow down their delivery or not get so frustrated when you ask for them to repeat instructions. Those are all, we're all here to enjoy ourselves, and for the most part, the air traffic controllers want you to have a good time too, so they'll do their best to help you out, I think, for the most part. I've always had good luck with that. Except for maybe that first controller where I could start to hear a little bit of frustration in his voice. I think that most everyone I've worked with has been very forgiving and very helpful. A good idea for brand new people is maybe find an airport where you're going to be spending a lot of time flying out of, or find some place with a lot of traffic and go park at an airport. Park an airplane at an airport, dial into the frequency, or one of the frequencies, and just start listening to clearances and things like that. Listen to the litany of how things go and practice writing down clearances. It doesn't matter what kind of format you use as long as you pick something that works for you and is consistent, because you know they're going to give you things like your squawk code. They're going to tell you your departure altitude and what altitude you can expect 10 minutes after your departure. They'll oftentimes give you a vector. Things like that. They'll give you your altimeter setting. You'll want to find a way to write all these down so you know what's going on without having to write it all out in longhand. Make it shorthand. I've got it down to where it's just basically a series of numbers, and I use the same order every time, so I know what everything is, and it's easy for me to keep track of it. Same thing with your radio frequencies. This is a big one because radio stacks are kind of a pain in the butt to navigate in FSX, and I believe even if you're using the virtual cockpit radios, sometimes it's not so easy. I usually just wind up using the generic radio stack when I'm in the airplane. It really just depends on what I'm doing. But it lets you hold your primary frequency and then the secondary frequency that you can switch to on a rapid basis. A good idea when you log into wherever you're going is look at all the frequencies you're going to have available. And if there's more than two, say you've got a tower, you've got a departure, you got a ground, you've got a tower, and you've got a center. Well, you know that when you go to take off, things are going to be a little hectic. So maybe it's a good idea to put center on one of your frequencies and then manually dial in the other two, because when you go to take off, all you have to do is switch frequencies and boom, you're ready to go. You don't have to worry about getting your head in the cockpit and dialing the frequency in and everything like that. So it's easier to dial in a frequency from ground to tower while you're taxiing than it is, when you're in takeoff and you're trying to make sure all your flaps are set, your gears are set, and things of that nature. That's the sort of stuff that no one really mentioned to me going into VATSIM. Granted, I didn't look as hard as maybe some other people did, but things that I thought were still important to know, and I would like to share with you guys because they're still fresh on my mind. They're things I think about all the time when I go to fly. So hopefully you found this little video instructional, and I hope it helps somebody to be a little more at ease with their flying. Another good thing to note is that nobody expects you to have your radio delivery perfect first time. It's going to be hectic. Everybody's got to learn somehow. Just take your time, slow down, don't try to be super fast about it. Just make sure you focus on your accuracy. The speed will come later. The more you do it, the more you realize what they're asking of you, what they're telling you, and what you need to respond with. So anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope somebody finds it instructional. Leave comments below if you want to see more videos like this. And everybody have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you later.